Cool. Dan Lamb, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this. I've been a big fan of your work for years now. How you going?
It's good. I just got back from, a nice little vacation. I was in Hawaii
Oh,
and
I
then I
love
went to
Hawaii.
Miami for Art Basel. So it's been good.
Nice. Where'd you go in Hawaii?
So I have family on Oahu
Oh, nice.
and we did a Thanksgiving sort of little reunion. I have family that came in from Australia and from Vietnam. So it was
Mm,
really nice.
fantastic. Hey, am I wrong? Is there like spewing lava in Hawaii right now?
I think there is, but I didn't see any of it because that's on the Big Island.
Right. I was actually thinking that would be like awesome. I mean, awesome inspiration, right? I mean, not like you you need inspiration. Like you've already got your thing pretty refined, but I mean, there's a lot of kind of lava like qualities in your work, no?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like I remember being a kid and being obsessed with watching videos of volcanoes and lava and just like the way it moved and um yeah, it's very attractive, but
Mm.
it's also very dangerous to play with. So I think some of those qualities like are
Just a bit.
emulated in my work for sure.
Yeah. No, I love Hawaii. I've been a few times and it's just like I thought it was going to be really cliche, like overhyped, but it really does live up to its reputation, doesn't it? It's just the best holiday location and just heaven on earth, really.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like everyone I tell about Hawaii because I mentioned I have family there, so I grew up going there pretty frequently.
Mm.
And yeah, I tell people all the time like Hawaii's amazing. It is like a paradise. Like it's like you get off the plane and I feel like your body somehow biologically knows like this is a prime place to live.
Right.
So
It
yeah,
feels
I think
healing. It feels
it
like the
does.
water
Yeah.
feels healing. Like I know that sounds very
Mhm.
like hippy dippy, but it literally does. I love it.
It really does. Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like and the sun there feels different. I don't know. It's very, very perfect.
for sure. Yeah. So you're back in Texas now?
I am. Yeah, I just
Nice.
got back a few days ago.
Great.
So now I'm back in the studio and I'm excited because I've had projects that I've been wanting to finish and continue and start and all that stuff. So it's nice to like get a break and then be super ready to jump back in.
Yeah. It's so nice to see your works in the background. They're big. You got some real big ones back there.
Yeah, that's definitely some of the ones I've wanted to continue. The large ones take so long,
Right.
and I have to kind of work on them. If I have shows coming up, then I have to focus on the shows, and sometimes the big ones get finished for it, sometimes they don't. So it's kind of like something that I work with at the same time as everything else. So
Mm.
as much as I want to see them come alive and be finished and stuff, I have to kind of have to take it slow on them, which is actually I think probably better for me because it the I work pretty quickly
Mm.
because I work a lot. And sometimes when I scale things up and I have to slow myself down, it's nice because I think I learn a lot that way.
Right. And you said I in our talks you said you're a bit of a night owl. So do you like it's what 7:30 p.m. now your time? So is this kind of like a starting time for your studio practice or
So I normally get to the studio around 2:30 or 3 in the
okay.
afternoon, and then I work until maybe like 11 or midnight.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I feel like the older I get, the less time I've got for the nighttime sessions. I'm
Yeah.
just like in bed by like 9:30 now. It's terrible.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, I agree. It's easier to because you have things you want to do like in the next day, in the morning and get, be an adult and all that stuff. But I feel like
mm,
creatively, there's like a really good like block of time when it's really quiet and there's like not much going on that feels, I don't know. I've talked to other artists about it and I feel like across the board, a lot of them are like, yeah, there's this really sweet spot of like maybe 11 to 1 a.m. or something like that
mm.
that feels it flows really well.
Right. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something like knowing that everyone's asleep and you're actually getting your best work done that just feels like extra good, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I'm such a big fan of your work. What how would you describe your art practice in your own words? Like I know what I see, but I'm wondering what you how you describe it.
Oh, that's always so tough for me because I feel like right now, I guess I'll dive into it a little bit like conceptually.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
so I think my practice is a good chunk of it has to do with materials and process and discovering things and experimenting and learning through material and play. And as I do that, sometimes the ideas come first, sometimes the ideas come out of that process. But I pretty much started working with polyurethane foam when I was in the end of undergrad, beginning of grad school, which is like my primary material, what a lot of my sculptures you see are made of. And at the time, I was thinking a lot about beauty and repulsion and these sort of like opposing ideas of uh I guess I should take a step back. I was getting a lot of feedback in school about like naturally, I think I can make really beautiful things. It's like that just comes easy.
Right.
And a lot of my professors in school, because you're in grad school and they got to push you and test you and all that stuff, they were like, well, it's beautiful, but so what? And so there's this sort of dialogue behind beauty that suggests that anything that's beautiful is shallow.
Hmm.
And I feel like as a woman, like, that's a thing that happens too. Like if you care too much about your appearance or your looks, you're shallow or you're not smart or whatever it is. And I kind of I didn't agree. I didn't agree with that assessment that beautiful things mean they're empty. So I started pushing it and I was like, well, what happens when something is too beautiful? Is that possible? I just sort of with the materials, just sort of like made things that were beautiful and attractive or had the characteristics of being attractive, but also pushing it to a side that started to become maybe texturally gross, something that had like
Hmm.
more of a visceral reaction. Like I experimented with all sorts of things. Like one of my pieces that I had in my thesis show, I put fake hair into it. And
Nice, nice.
so it was like resin and hair and like on these forms, and it looked at first from a distance you're like, oh, that's pretty and sparkly. You get up close to it and it was like, ew, this looks like the hair in a drain, that
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And so that really started, I think, the groundwork for the work that I'm making now and that play between like opposing ideas. So as I got out of grad school and continued my practice, I continued to push like, what else am I interested in? What else is there? And I think that my favorite space to be in is those opposing ideas. So like when things are seemingly like organic versus inorganic, I'm using very inorganic materials, but I'm making these very organic forms.
Right, right.
um that kind of stuff, like
Hmm.
it's hard but it looks soft. So rather than thinking about it as like opposing, it became more balanced. It's like creating space for myself in between these spaces. um so that's kind of where it started. And now, as I continue making this work and continuing to like refine my voice and my aesthetic, I I think right now it's tough for me because I feel like it's a lot more to do with perception and reality and how something is viewed, what you think is happening versus what's actually happening. And I think a lot of that has to do with like my own personal practice outside of art, which is like, like a more physical practice of like exercise, like meditation. Um, I guess it borders on the spiritual, and listening to people like Alan Watts
Love
or,
Alan Watts. Yeah.
like, so
Yeah.
it's like, I can't help but start seeing that in my own work. And, and for a long time too, people have been like, oh, there seems to be this like psychedelic element to your work. And for a long time, I haven't directly addressed it. But I know it plays a role. So I think that's sort of where like my ideas are going. So because it feels like a transitional stage, it's hard for me to pinpoint now, like exactly what I'm saying,
Hmm.
but the work still comes. And I think
Yeah.
it is still coming from a natural, like real place. So I don't know. It's kind of exciting to not know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of where my mind is at now.
That's awesome. So you're saying kind of, I suppose, the spiritual aspects and of your interests, like I guess listening to stuff while you're working, and the psychedelic aspects are just coming much more into the forefront of your idea generating as you make.
Hmm.
Right. So that
Yeah,
wasn't so much in the past. It was more, I suppose, a bit of a
I think
shift of priorities.
yes,
Mm.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't like, it wasn't the focal point. I
Right.
think all of this stuff, is like the way I see life and art, I think it's all one thing. So everything's just like boiling and simmering inside of you, and then like what comes up to the surface is what comes up, and you can't push things, you can't rush things. They come up as they do. And I think as artists, that's like our special gift. Like it's the lens that we see through. So we all share, as humans, we all share this human experience, but as an individual person, you have your special voice, your lens, your filter that it comes through.
Mm.
And um I guess that's sort of what I'm digging through, and just like continuing to let all of the stuff I experience in my life bubble up. And while the psychedelic side of things has always been there, because I've dabbled in like the psychedelics myself, and I feel like it has, I mean, there's no question it's changed who I am as a person. And it's affected my personality and all that stuff. Like I haven't made work about that. And I feel like I'm starting to like tread closer to that through this kind of conversation about like reality and what we think we see versus what's happening, like this interior world versus the outside world. Um, yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, you've hit on all of my buzz subjects that I just can't get enough of right there. That's awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, I love the kind of themes that you were mentioning, earlier of what was it, like allure and repulsion. Like this, you've got this just incredible, beautiful aesthetic through like the language of color and form, and I don't know, using gradients and then contrasting gradients with your spikes, but then yeah, contrast with these kind of repulsive shapes. I mean, repulsive is such a harsh word. I don't think they're
Mm.
repulsive, but I use that in terms of they look very biological sometimes, or alien, or I don't know. There's something about also the brightness, and how poppy your works are. Like in nature, a lot of those kinds of things are very poisonous. They're very attractive and alluring, but like frogs can be really poisonous when they're really bright, or blue-ringed octopus, or even some fungus. They're almost a warning sign, but you kind of can't help but want to touch them and pick them up, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. And in that same vein, like then there's, when you look at certain birds and their plumage, and how beautiful and bright they are, then it's an attractor. It's like a
right.
signal to their mates. So absolutely. Like a lot of my inspiration comes from nature. If we're
Mm,
talking about like more direct influence. Um, Visually for sure. Like I look at a lot of fungus and mold and like that kind of stuff for just like form.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful, fantastic. Yeah, I get a lot more inspiration from the natural world than I do like the art world as well with my
Hmm.
practice. It's just, I mean, it's all there, right? It's all there.
Yeah,
Just emulate nature in
exactly.
in your own kind of flair, and the results are incredible.
Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, yeah, that's it. I don't think it gets any better than nature. Like no one's
exactly.
done it better.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So when did this I don't know if you don't mind talking about it, but yeah, this kind of, I suppose, psychedelic revelations and stuff, are these kind of new in your life, or is it just, I suppose, more new in terms of bringing it into the thought process of idea generating for your art? I mean, when did you when tell me about your psychedelic explorations?
So I'm 34 and
Hmm.
I took my first mushroom trip when I was probably 20 or 21.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been there for a really long time. And I think it's been there, but I think especially like 15 years ago, that conversation about psychedelics wasn't as embraced as it is today. I feel like there
Hmm.
was more of a stigma to it. And,
Definitely.
just like with pot smoking today, like everyone does it. It's legalized in a lot of places, so we can talk about it more. But before, it was like, "Ooh, no, like you don't, you just don't openly speak about those things." So, well, of course, there's like many artists who are like psychedelic artists who have been making art like that for a very long time too. But I think especially in school, it's hard to like be like, oh yeah, this is about my trip that I had or whatever. That's not like I feel like it's not taken as seriously. But um while that's influenced a lot of my work, I think that, like you said, it's only more recently um become more of a topic for me. I think so. I find myself like thinking about school a lot because while I was in grad school, I went to a bunch of artist talks, like artists that I looked up to, just like these amazing people who have had amazing careers, make amazing art. And so many of them talked about this idea of unlearning. And I was like, what are they talking about? I'm in school right now. I'm here to learn. And then I'm watching these artists I look up to who are saying, like, I had to unlearn school. So I didn't understand like what that meant. And now that I've been away from school for like almost 10 years now, um, I'm like, oh, I think I understand what they're talking about. So there's this, you go to school and you're taught and you learn, but then you don't personally, like, I don't feel like I want to hold on to academia or what's taught in academia because there's a lot I disagree with. And so then thinking about like, okay, moving forward for myself, for my own personal development as a person, what does future learning look like? How do I continue to learn and be curious? And then I thought, well, then there's this whole underlying thing that's been there for this whole time, psychedelics, this inner world, spirituality, that I haven't really like delved into or focused on or given it like the intention that I think it should get, at least at this point in my life. So yeah, so I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is like the next journey,
Yeah.
and yeah. So um, I've been finding it through various different ways, like I mentioned, like a physical practice, so like exercise, yoga, meditation, like these more um using my physical body to get in touch with what's going on inside. The art practice itself, like I think I'm starting to, in the past like 3 or 4 years, starting to realize like the practice itself is like a meditation, more intentionally using it as a meditation. And when we talk about like flow states and like all this stuff, it's like it all feels like the same. Like sometimes when I'm meditating, the feelings I get or the things that kind of come up feel very similar to when I'm making art or I'm in the zone, you know? So
Mm.
instead of thinking about it as like separate things, embracing it more as like just one big pot.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. That's awesome. I mean, I relate so much. Like when I was at university, really struggled with the whole kind of structure of it, and actually just kind of jump through the hoops, figure out exactly what they wanted from me, what they required from me, what ideas was I not addressing, how to do it. And I mean, similarly, it wasn't until I had a really big breakthrough psychedelic experience in probably at the end of my second year at uni, start of the final year of uni, where my art practice actually took a really positive turn. It was really uninspiring, really drab, gray cityscapes, paintings that were just no good for anyone. And then bang, color, nature, all the good things that are just so exciting that we should celebrate. They just became instantly like at the forefront of my attention. It wasn't like I'm trying to emulate a drug trip so much, but it's like, cool, well, what's important? Nature is key. Exactly
Yeah.
what you're saying. Nature is amazing. We need to spend more time in nature. We need to celebrate nature, color, everything. Just like happy. It was a huge positive influence for my practice, at least alone, for me and my practice. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot I relate to in what you've said.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. That's the thing too. Like, I think that's something that school does to you. Is it kind of like there? I don't know if it's just school, but there's this kind of like idea of what an artist to be taken seriously. It's like you need to make serious art. And
Mm,
what does serious mean? But I went through a similar sort of self-assessment of like, what's important to me?
yep.
Ultimately, I am in this position to make art as my career. And I'm so lucky, and it's like, do I want to be unhappy doing that, making sad, serious art, which has its place. And I'm
Hmm.
sure it speaks to, an audience of people. But for me, it's like, no, like life and art making, it's joyful. It should be fun. I should be curious and learning and experimenting and playing. And like that same excitement that comes from like being a child learning or seeing something for the first time, like I think that should be our whole life, you
Mm,
know?
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many ideas of how, especially in the past, how the artist should be tormented, troubled. They see things quite differently. A lot of art is hard to access for a lot of the general public.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm all about like expression can be happy too. It can be
Mhm.
joyous, it can be spiritual, it can be express love and just electricity for life. The world's pretty fucked, right? The world's pretty
Yeah.
fucked. Maybe art really needs to kind of inject a bit of joy there. So I mean, your work instantly has that reaction for me, and I'm sure so many people when you see it. It's so appealing. It's alien, right? It's something that we haven't, you just don't quite see. It's familiar, but it's unfamiliar. Yeah. I've heard you say a lot of times that people just want to touch it, and I can completely understand why. Which is, I'm sure, is really frustrating when you're trying to make nice, expensive art in a gallery setting, right?
Yeah, it's really like it's interesting because a lot of how I got started was through Instagram. That's how I
Yeah,
became a
yeah.
full-time artist.
Hmm.
And to know that my work is speaking still through a screen in a way where people still want to touch it, I
Right.
think that's one of those things. Like, I think that's what nature does to somebody, right? Like you see something online, you're like, oh, I want to be there, I want to go there, I want to like
Mm.
be a part of that thing. And so it's really cool to be able to make stuff that like speaks to people in a similar way, maybe like in the same vein of like, oh, what is that thing? I want to learn or know it with my hands. I want to like be in its presence and feel it. um
Yeah.
yeah. And you mentioned something, what you said about accessibility with art.
Hmm.
I think that's another element of sort of like the unlearning of school, where you start to realize like, you know, it being able to go to school in the first place for art is such a privilege. And um then you learn it, you see all this amazing art, and you see art that's like very conceptual, and it's stuff that you may not, without the schooling, you may not get. And so even that comes from like this place of privilege. So as I've been like on Instagram and sharing my work and this power of social media, it's like my work has reached a lot of people who are art lovers. And I hear so often people saying like, oh my gosh, like I don't even love art, or I don't even like art, but I like your work. And so there's this weird disconnect between like the visual arts and people. And when you look at any other creative field, like movies, music, it's so accessible. People are easily, you can turn on the radio, you can hear music, you can turn on your television, you can see TV, you can get entertainment, you can get whatever. And the visual arts is kind of like this like secret or something in it. And but I know there's so many people out there who enjoy and love it and have the urge to create, you know, all that stuff. So that's been like another thing that like I've had to come to learn, that's like, oh wow, like being being a visual artist doesn't mean that I'm only showing my work to a certain like niche
Hmm.
group of people. It's like
Sure.
it's for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly like what you said about music. I'm always so jealous of musicians. I mean, everyone has their taste of music, right? I mean, whether it's
Hmm.
good or bad, but it's so diverse. But everyone is in tune with at least how they like to express or release their emotions through someone else's creative practice through audio waves. And art, it just hasn't, like, Instagram has helped so much. Like, it's made art so much more accessible, but there's still a little bit of a gap for the average person. But yeah, I am always very jealous of musicians. I would love to be a musician, but for that reason alone. You can get inside someone's soul instantly, right?
Right. Yeah. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
I feel like art has the same, it could have the same power, but yeah, that
there is often like some kind of level of being informed somewhat with a lot of art, you know, like even having so many conversations with artists through this podcast, which I'm so grateful for, after getting a bit more informed about their practice, it does enrich the experience for me a lot of the time. It does help me understand and see I guess the fingerprints of the artists expressed in their work, what that actually means, because there is often a cryptic nature with a lot of art, which is great. That's poetry, right? That's part of it, of not making it too obvious. But yeah, there is something that is required often a little bit more with the visual medium. And actually, kind of what you're saying before, this idea from the establishment, I suppose, the artistic establishment, that beauty isn't enough. It can't just be cool or beautiful to that's often shunned. But I really think that's changing, right? Particularly in this digital age.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I see it a lot with like digital art, you know, like because, well, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with how quickly we're able to consume it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get much out of university?
I feel like I did. I know
Right.
I talk I know I have said quite a few negative things about it, but I enjoyed it. I think it was really important to go because I loved like the art theory classes. I loved my art history classes. While I think critique, you know, going to art critiques and stuff like that has like there's like some inherent problems with it. I really enjoyed like defending my work and talking about it and talking about other people's work because it was such a like it was an exchanging of ideas. And that kind of energy doesn't really exist outside of art school, I feel like, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I think I think there's so much to gain from critique, and a lot of people, yeah, I struggled at art school. I found it really hard. I hated it when I was in it. I thought all the lecturers were stupid and they don't care, and I don't know, just got so sick of justifying why. But you know, I'm the same age. I'm 35 now. Looking back all these years, I'm like, no, that was so important to go through and to understand and toughen you up a bit. Actually, be able to defend your ideas. And yeah, I think there should be a bit more of that. So many people are very scared to give their opinions these days, especially if they're not quite supportive or good, but you know, opinions are valid. That's fine. You don't have to like everything. And I don't really care that much if someone doesn't like my work. You know, if they're being an asshole, sure, that's one thing. But if it's not their taste, it doesn't bother me at all. It just doesn't. That's fine. Like
yeah. Yeah, I feel like it definitely like you said, it toughens you up, like it builds a thicker skin, and especially like putting your work out there on social media where it's very easy for people to give opinions without having an actual discussion about anything. Like in a critique, there's a back and forth. You're face to face with somebody and you're looking at each other in the face, you know, and like you're having a discussion versus like online where someone can just say whatever they want. And sometimes like someone's having a bad day and they just want to like make someone else have a bad day, and you could read that comment and it could be like, oh wow, that sucks to like read that and now I feel kind of shitty. But you know, going through critique, you're like, well, okay, whatever, it's just another person, it's just another opinion, like you know.
Yeah, I mean, do you get that much? I mean, you've got like 500,000 followers on Instagram, like it's huge. And actually, like, I think I heard in another podcast. So, and you just mentioned before, Instagram and social media was a huge, a big part of I suppose your success and getting out to the masses. How did it kind of all happen for you? So I've just thrown so many questions out there, but yeah, what was the rise of getting your art out there? Were you in the kind of early days of Instagram, or did you have a viral moment, or how did it all unfold?
Yeah, so I got on Instagram, I think I started my account maybe 2014. I think Instagram had been like a thing for a couple years. Um, I didn't really start sharing my work until after I graduated. So like 2015, I would say I started like just as a means of, suddenly like I didn't have school anymore and I didn't have a not a reason, but I didn't have like, oh, there's this deadline, right? So rather than I would make something and then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to post it so I can share with other people and they can see it. So it's just like it's there. There's a record of it. And it just kind of started taking off from there. Like people saw my work and the way the algorithm was back then, which has changed so many times since then. It a lot of people saw it and were interested. So they started following me. And then I started making videos and I definitely, just like little moments of my while I'm working where I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I feel like other people might think this is interesting. So it was very organic. It was very natural, just like no like curation of like this is going to get me views. It was just like this moment. This is cool. I'm going to share it. And definitely from that there were like I've had many viral videos and that was a whole new thing. Like school did not prepare me for that. No
Yeah,
one no
yeah,
one talked about like going viral on Instagram in art school. Um so I think that was really kind of how it started. And then I found like, there was like, that's the whole thing. Like there were so many people who were interested in art and this platform was just so good for artists and galleries and curators, just people who wanted something visual. And so I just made a lot of connections that way. And yeah, I think 20 I think 2015 it really started blowing up. I don't remember like my numbers or when I hit like certain milestones, but it's just grown pretty steadily since then. And then in like 2019 I got on TikTok, and so I have TikTok too. So that's been its own like new thing to learn and navigate. Um but yeah, I really think those viral moments, but then like genuinely like people really enjoying my work and sort of being in this like I don't know, it's strange. It's still kind of weird for me to be someone who is an artist first and foremost, but I also make content, So it's like
right,
I
right.
have numbers that could be considered influencer. So there's this like weird meshing of like different roles that I feel like I could play. Um, but I realistically, like at the end of the day, I'm still like, I'm just an artist and I only post when I make something that I feel like sharing. Um, It's kind of tough though, because sometimes you feel like the pressure. I know a lot of people go through this where it's like, oh, I gotta post to like get the likes, to get the followers, to get the views, and there's like this pressure to like make work, to get content. Um, which is weird. I think it's a weird thing to experience. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, that's the world we're living in now, right? Like every artist has to
yeah.
be their own content creator, and as Instagram becomes much more kind of copying TikTok, it's all about videos, and now everyone has to learn how to video edit and stuff. And I mean, hey, if you enjoy doing that, sounds like you enjoy doing that anyway, so it's not really a huge adjustment. But I know a lot of artists struggling to keep up with the algorithmic changes of Instagram. But hey, good on you. Like that's fantastic. That's really worked out. When you contrasting, I suppose, those early viral moments when things just blew up and everyone's just loving your work and sharing it, and contrasting that with, I suppose, wrapping up university. I mean, how did you do at university? You've mentioned the lecturers kind of talked about beauty isn't enough. I mean, did you kind of leave feeling good entering the world, or were they a bit kind of soul destroying and crushing and saying, your work isn't quite there, keep at it, and then bang, you've just like hit overnight success as soon as you leave, or?
Um, so I would say overall, I had good support through school. And
Good.
I would actually say that my professors, they were supportive. And I think I found, the ones that could guide me in a way that I felt was helpful to me and not just like out of self-interest. But really, I think what excited me the most was the response from my peers. So at the end of, school, you do like a thesis show, and it's just like a presentation of a body of work that you've been working on for the past, whatever, 2 or 3 years. And I did my thesis exhibition, and of course I passed it according to my professors. But then, we have the opening, and then like students and everyone can come and see it. And there was just so much feedback from my peers. And this was pre-Instagram, so it's just like people I went to school with, people who were just seeing my work for the first time, other students from other areas of the school. And like I had a little notebook that people could sign, like, or whatever. And I just had people who like came up to me and were like, "Oh my God, this work is so exciting. I've never seen anything like it. I am so excited for you. There's so much you can do." And I got that repeatedly. Like so many people gave me that. And it was so exciting to feel that making the work, and then to have other people feel that as well and express it to me. To take the time to just tell me that alone, I think is really powerful. Um so I don't know if my professors were as like excited about it, but I know that the people that saw it were. And that kept me really excited about it, to know that like I was making something that felt real or true, that connected with others. And so, you know, I don't think school was soul crushing in any way. I was still very excited to continue making work after school. But I think after school too, there's like things that you lose, like you lose your studio space, and you have to figure out like, well, how am I going to make, like I have student loans now or whatever. And then like, how do I switch from having the studio space to a smaller space or no space? What kind of work do I make now? Do I just continue, all these kinds of questions of like, just like that newness, right? That change. And yeah, but I mean, I've always been creative. I've been I've wanted to be an artist since I was very young. And
Right.
so I don't think that something like school could crush my spirit. Um
Good,
yeah.
good, good. Yeah, nice
Yeah.
one. How do you make your work? I mean, I've seen a lot of process videos. It looks like, I mean, your studio looks like a bit of a chemistry lab, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
constantly kind of mixing up colorful potions, pouring them. What is, you said a polyurethane foam is your primary uh, material? Is that like
Yeah.
an expander foam?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay, cool.
there's different kinds.
Hmm.
I first learned about polyurethane foam from an artist named Linda Banglis. So like in school, doing my research and looking at all kinds of art. And Linda Banglis was very prominent in the 70s, like feminist artist. And she had done this amazing installation at a museum where it was an on-site installation, and she had poured this expanding foam, and it was like kind of cascading off of the walls, but they were like suspended. And I was just so interested in this, like, what is this material that looks like it's frozen in time? It looks like a liquid, but it's a solid. Um, so, I did my research and found out what she used, and I found a place that I could like online that I could order it. And I also use a lot of resins. So when I was
Hmm.
started using all these materials, like there were literally no there you couldn't just get on YouTube and like search for like tutorials, so there
Yeah.
was a lot of experimenting and a lot of just figuring out what mistakes could be made, what the materials could do or can't do. And just figuring out like your own little things. And then as you work with something and you kind of figure out, just like, I mean, I guess the same with paint, right? Like how you push paint around with your paintbrush, and the kinds of mediums that you use to get your glazes or whatever it is, your textures, whatever. Same kind of idea. Like you start to work with the material and you figure out, well, I like this about it, I don't like this about it, how can I hone in on this, how can I control it in this way or let it go in a way. So yeah, I started using the polyurethane foam, I started using resins. And I what I what I know I didn't want was I didn't want to just use the material solely. I didn't want something to be immediately recognizable. So polyurethane foam, as it's become more popular, has a very distinct look. And at the time it was new and fresh, but then I was like, no, like I wanna continue like building and creating something that starts to look not like it began. Um Yeah, and so that's how I sort of started getting into like just layering material. So I do like polyurethane foam, I'll do resin pours over that foam. I'll build it up with other stuff, like play around with like I've played with silicones, lots of acrylic paints and like modeling pastes and all kinds of stuff, plaster. Um, yeah, to just kind of make something eventually that's unique.
Mm. So these like
Yeah.
drips, like the drippy ones that you do, I can see one in the background. I mean, are
Mhm.
they organic drips, or are you kind of creating a bit of a sculptural shape before and then adding to that with resin pours so it really looks like it's dripping? I mean, are they organically dripped?
Yeah, so
Mm.
yes, the foam itself it's a two-part mix and you mix it together. You have a very short window of time as you're mixing it before it starts expanding. And there's sort of like a sweet spot, like you as you work with the material, you learn like now's the time to pour or
Yeah,
it's too
yeah.
late. It's like it's setting. So depending on the foam, because there's different types of foams too, you pour and you can kind of expect when something is gonna like freeze. So a lot of times, like the shape, this thing back here, I think is what you're
Mm-hmm.
mentioning. Like you can kind
Yep.
of see like I want it to come down this low. So you can kind of dictate like how much you pour and then it'll set as it's like dripping,
Dripping.
it'll set.
Yep. Yep.
So there's times where most of the time it's a very organic process like that, but sometimes I will go back in and sort of like break off some of the drips and compose a little bit more um to shape like how this one's longer, this one's shorter, to create something that looks a little bit more dynamic. Are you there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so it's fun because it's like every time you use the material and the weather, like the environment in the studio, if it's warm, if it's cold, if it's more humid, those things can affect the materials. So there's always stuff that I'm like figuring out. And actually, during this summer, my AC, my air conditioning went out.
Right.
And
Yeah, in Texas, that sounds
yeah,
fun.
it was very hot. Um, and it was I tried using this swamp cooler, so it's like it could cool down the space, but it didn't work. So it made it very humid in here. Anyway, through all of that stuff, like after the AC got back on, I came back into the studio and there were a few sculptures that I had started that had like shriveled.
Oh no.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, like this is so interesting. Like so I don't it'll probably be a very long time before I can figure out like how to control that. But
Right.
I thought it was really interesting how it looked like this shriveling and the fact that it took that much time for it to happen. So then it's like, okay, well, if I want to control that, it's going to be about like controlling humidity and temperature and what kind of like, mechanism do I have to create in order to control those elements, right?
Oh my God.
Um,
Your like studio is just gonna get more and more complex, just like climate controlled little booths
yeah.
with just that's like set to a month of just
Yeah.
moisture exposure. Oh my God, far out. I mean, your studio is already massive, right? It's a good sized studio.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
1,800 square feet. I
Great.
love it. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your failure to success ratio when playing around with new shapes, forms, and materials?
Hmm. That is a good question. I don't know if I can I'd say success probably like 80% of the time,
Right. You're pretty
you
familiar with
know?
the materials you're using. You kind
Yeah.
of know. Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever introduce completely new materials, or you've kind of done all that in your early days?
No, I do. I definitely
Hmm.
try. The way I like to think about it is um like materials and learning materials is kind of like this toolbox, right? So it's like
Hmm.
instead of having like a hammer and like pliers or whatever drill, um, like I'll find a new material and I'll kind of play with it and learn it and see if it fits anywhere at the time. But sometimes it doesn't. So that's happened with me multiple times before where I'll play with something and I'm like, cool, that's great. And I kind of get it just on a very like surface level. I get it. And then maybe like 3 years down the road, I'm working on something. I'm like, oh my God, that's it. I got to get that. I'll try, let me try this material on this and see what happens. Um, so I think I'm always looking for like new materials. That'll be like part of my research sometimes where I'm just like, because, technology is moving forward. And with technology comes a lot of, like, there's so many of these like new plastics and all different kinds of things that are being invented for whatever purposes. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's not art purposes, but then it can become that. So
Right.
I I think it's an important part of how I play in the studio or experiment. I look at new things. Like I love going to the hardware store sometimes and just
Hmm.
like walking up and down the aisles and seeing like what's what's going on, like what's what's out there. Um Sometimes there's stuff like solvents too, like acetones, alcohols, stuff like that that can it's a little bit more precarious, with like how it mixes with things, but those are also things that could be used um have you ever sprayed spray paint onto styrofoam and the spray paint eats
Yeah,
away at the styrofoam? That's a
totally.
really
Yep.
cool like thing that happens.
Hmm.
Um so even those kinds of like mistakes or whatever, like those are very informative.
Yeah, full mad scientist vibes. I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you do play with a lot of different materials, at least with the finish, you use iridescent paint that changes color when you move around, automotive paint, similar, has really interesting reflective qualities. Um, your spikes where you kind of apply them almost like you're making a cake, and then having the base form having like a great gradient, but then the spikes are almost in a reverse gradient. It's so exciting to see, and it really does inspire me. I haven't really like experimented that much with different mediums. I mean, my art's very, very different, but it does inspire to see what's possible. Some of your work's really glittery, some of it's really bling, some of it's really organic, and yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool to see the diversity of materials that you use. And
Hmm.
yeah, love it, love it, love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean I think it's born of my own uh I don't get bored in the studio. That's not what it is, but it's just out of my own like I see something and I'm like, "Oh, I want to try it."
Right,
Like
right.
what's going on with that? um and yeah, like some of like the bling stuff, it's like who doesn't love something sparkly, And
Totally.
so like why not take one of my forums and put a bunch of Swarovski crystals on there
Right.
just
Nice.
to see what it looks like.
Fantastic. Are there any materials or finishes or anything that are new and exciting that you're getting excited by now?
Yeah, I mean, I have some ideas right now that I'm gonna try of combining textures of like I want to try so I have some new pieces that are like wall pieces that I'm using. I'm bringing the spikes back in, but in a more dense way.
Mm.
Um and I'm interested in seeing what happens if I like do spikes, but then I put I put texture over the spikes, what happens then to the forms, like how does that
Hmm.
change? Um I've dabbled in mold making a little bit, and it's something that I'm not nowhere near. Like I'm very, very basic and beginner with it, but I think there could be some really cool things to do with mold making that I want to play with. Uh, I, I think the other part of it too is that like a lot of these materials, like sometimes they're toxic,
Yeah,
so there's a
wondering about that.
limitation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, like I wear the masks and I have like the HEPA filters and all that stuff, but you just have to be careful. So sometimes there's stuff I'm interested in, but I'm like, I don't know if I can work with that in the studio. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's safe, for
Mm.
like long-term exposure and the off gassing and all that stuff. So there's things I'm interested in, but I'm like, maybe, and also I don't want to take it outside, because if it's not good for me in here, then I don't think it's good for like
Yeah.
for the
Just
environment, you know?
sure, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
in terms of inspiration, you kind of mentioned that you look at you know, fungus and mushrooms and things. I'm wondering what is the kind of broad spectrum of your inspiration? I mean, are you a fan of sci-fi? Like some of your works really seem alien, you know, they seem really
yeah.
alien. Are there, yeah, and when you kind of look at like biology almost, there's so many different quality. I mean, the process videos are really like just remind me of food, you know, like
Hmm.
there's a real kind of in the pouring and the I don't know what you call that when you're applying the spikes, like in one of those cake icing things. There's I
Hmm.
mean, what are some of the things that your go-tos that really inspire you?
Um, I mean, yeah, we touched on it, nature. I think that's the
Mm,
number one.
yeah.
For me, so there's a balance, I think, when I think about like inspiration too, because like, you know, when we get online, we see a lot of things, and it's sometimes it can be overwhelming. And then this happens to everybody, where you see something, then you forget about it, and then you like try it and you're like, oh shit, I just created this thing that I saw online, you know, like that kind of
Mm,
stuff. So I
hmm.
try to limit my exposure to what I'm seeing, like as far as social media and like other artists. Um, but as far as like visual inspiration, like for sure nature, fungus. I'm not a huge fan of sci-fi, though I know my work looks very alien and
Hmm.
otherworldly. Um, yeah, I guess, I mean, like I get the most out of, say, like taking a hike and like just going and seeing how things are growing like on a dead log, you know, like how something's
Right.
deteriorating and then you see the fungus growing out of it and it's like breaking it down, or like how things work together. Like, um, I don't know, like it's not direct, but seeing like stuff decay or seeing stuff build up, like an ant pile, right? Like you're seeing how like these ants are working together and they're building the structure and how things are layered. And like I think that will come up in my work. Like just, oh, like I'm gonna build this up and build this up and continue and build. And I mean, I see that. And of course, like when we talk about that stuff, it's like mimicked all over nature. That same pattern happens across
Mm.
the board, like over and over again. So on a micro and macro scale, you see it. So like going on a hike in like southern Utah, where you know you can see a lot of the rocks and the geology and how things have eroded over time, over millions of years. Um,
They
you know,
look
you're like, oh,
melting, right?
here's,
They look
yeah,
melting and stretching, and
yeah,
particularly in Utah. I went a few years ago, and it there's a lot of qualities where you can see through the rocks, and there's these holes that look like stalactites or whatever, but
yeah,
they look fluid. It's
yeah,
weird. Yeah,
yeah. It's amazing.
it
Like southern
is.
Utah
Yeah,
is one of my favorite places. I'm so glad you've been, because now we can talk about it.
yeah, yeah.
But it's it blows my mind. Like we took this road trip through southern Utah. I've been a couple times now, and every 10 miles you drive, there's like a whole new geological thing that happened, you know, at this age, this like stage in the Earth's development.
Hmm.
This used to be like an ocean, this used to be a rainforest, this, you know, and there's so much. And it's cool to just see how like I mentioned earlier, like the earth is, nature is the best, no one's done it better. And
Hmm.
so there's that evidence, right, of like that process across time, and you can see it and you can take it in. And um yeah, it's just so inspiring. And sometimes like I see that stuff and there's not an immediate like, it's not like, oh, let me go into the studio and make that, but it it marinates, you know, it just sits
Right,
inside of you.
right.
And then 2 months later, oh my, there's this thing I just made that looks like that thing I saw in Utah.
Hmm. Have you been to Bryce
Yeah.
Canyon?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
Incredible. Have you been to
It's so
Antelope
good.
Canyon?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
the only place I didn't get to was Arches that I really wanted to, Arches National Park. But I
Hmm.
mean, seriously, what the hell is going on with that place? It's like the
I
best nature
know.
I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
It's insane.
Yeah, it really is. But
Yeah.
yeah, the natural erosion and stuff has been more and more an interest of mine of just these strange forms, you know. Like if you drew
Mhm.
them, they'd look silly, but then when you see them, you're like, well, it's real. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a part of it is really like I see it like almost like a sci-fi kind of set. Like I'm surprised there haven't been more I mean, they probably have, but sci-fi is just filmed out in the Arizona or Utah desert.
Yeah. It's really, I mean, it's so beautiful and it is very unreal. It literally, it's, I think there's something about too, like, you know, you're used to your everyday life and the way you see nature. Like for me here in Dallas, there's lots of trees, it's green, it's pretty flat. And then to
Hmm.
just plop yourself down into a place like Southern Utah, you know, in Zion or Bryce Canyon or whatever, and it's just so different, so red and vibrant. And unlike what you see every day,
Mm.
um, it makes such a huge impact, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Um,
like, I went on this, my last road trip there, I think was maybe 2019, 2018. And I still think about it, you know, like I
yeah.
still, yeah.
Absolutely. I still make paintings about you know, Monument Valley or Bryce Canyon. Like still I've been painting them since I went, which was like 4 5 years ago, I guess, something like
Mhm.
that. 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a while. But yeah, that place really stuck with me. I mean, I feel like from what I've seen, America has the best nature in the world. From what I mean, from what I've seen. I'm sure
Hmm.
there's so much out there, right?
Yeah.
But it's just yeah, it's addictive. I'm really keen to get back and just keep exploring. We did a month in a like a little minivan, just going national park to national park, and it was
Hmm.
yeah, probably the best trip of my life. Love it.
So which other national parks did you go to?
I mean, mostly the West Coast. So we did like Yosemite.
Okay.
Where else did we go? Crater Lake, Joshua Tree. Uh, All right, I'm blanking because I'm put on the spot, but quite a few. Um, yeah, what Lake Tahoe? Even Lake Tahoe is amazing. Like I know
Hmm.
that's kind of a real holiday spot, but it's parts of it is like it's almost like you're in Croatia, like in the beach in Croatia, but it's fresh water and you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about sharks. So which suits me just fine.
Yeah.
But I've always been really attracted to the desert landscapes. I don't know why. Something about
Yeah.
Death Valley as well. Like
Hmm.
Death Valley is crazy. It's
Yeah.
yeah, really I love that beauty and the harshness. And yeah, kind of in line with that alluring and not repulsive, but it's really hostile. A lot of those environments
Hmm.
they appear very hostile, but they're full of life and they're incredible to explore.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you on the desert for sure. Like
Hmm.
there's just something about it. It's yeah, I don't know. I asked I a long time ago I was talking to somebody about like she was saying how she loved Tennessee and it's so green and hilly and whatever. And I was like, so you would pick Tennessee over like Utah? And she's like, oh, absolutely. And I was like, oh, there's this like this maybe it's like two camps, right? The desert people and then like the
Totally.
green, hilly, maybe mountainy people. And nothing wrong with mountains, but I feel like for me, I've seen a lot of mountains and I feel like a lot
Hmm.
of mountains start to look the same.
Right. Hey, don't get me
But
started on the beach people, Dan. The bloody beach
okay.
people. Come on. I mean, they all look the same, right? So,
Well, yeah, no, I agree. Although Hawaii's beaches are very, very nice.
yeah, actually, nah.
Um,
I go back on that instantly. Hawaii is so nice.
yeah. And Hawaii has some really great mountains too.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so
So,
young, right? It's like super
yeah.
volcanic. So like the whole, I guess, geological age of it is really, really fresh. And I think that's a thing with Australia where I'm from is you know, I think Australia, I could be wrong, but I think it's like the oldest continent. So there's so many epic spots, but there's also a lot of like flat polished, you know, it's been eroded. So much has
Mm,
been eroded. It's really really flat and vast. And yeah, America like the I don't know. It's a lot more condensed. Everything's bigger, right? Everything's jutting up
mhm.
like 10 times the size of things in Australia. It's It's awesome. Love it.
Yeah.
Very, very keen for some
Um,
nature time soon.
when I was in Australia, we went to this really beautiful beach town though.
Oh,
And
do you remember the name?
it was
Where,
a
where, whereabouts were you, in Melbourne or Sydney or?
so let me see if I can find it. We were in Sydney and then my family was in Canberra.
Mhm.
Um and so we road tripped from Sydney to Canberra. Let me see if I can find it. It was like maybe Uladula.
Ulladulla. I mean, it sounds like an Australian town. It definitely sounds like, I've never heard of Ulladulla, but it definitely could be a place, that's for sure.
Maybe that was the one, but it was really beautiful because I feel like the beach was very big. It was really long, like
Mm,
a lot of sand, and it was just very peaceful.
mm. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really nice beach, but
yeah. There's
you
some
know,
epic spots in Australia for sure.
yeah.
Hey, we're kind of, you said you weren't that into sci-fi, but have you seen the film Annihilation?
I have not seen it, but a lot of people have told me my work looks like the thing in it. It
Well, there's
reminds them
just,
of
yeah, there's a beautiful quality of that film. I mean, it's like a psychedelic sci-fi horror, really, with Natalie Portman. It's really like visually, it's just beautiful. I see a lot of similarities with Adrian Cox's work as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his paintings. They're
Mm,
a lot of like floral people and stuff, but there's this incredible, so much of this like alien mutations. Like a lot of them are real mutations, but they're all visually really appealing, but
mm,
extremely dangerous and like it's all going to kill you. Everything's going to kill you, but there's a beauty to it, which I love that kind of contrast. But yeah, I was just wondering whether you'd seen that film because it's I don't know. I've found a lot of inspiration around the aesthetics of that movie.
mm.
But yeah,
Yeah, I should
recommend.
watch it.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
it's
Like I
fun.
said,
It's a fun film.
I'm not a huge sci-fi person. I don't know why. I lean more towards like fantasy.
Hmm.
If I'm gonna watch like either genre, I guess. But my favorite is actually horror. I like horror and comedy.
Oh well, I mean, Annihilation is
Oh,
kind of horror.
okay.
It's a sci-fi horror. It's a psychedelic sci-fi horror, but it's definitely a horror film for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
All
some
right.
scary bits.
Okay, good. Okay, now I'll watch it.
Yeah, nice one. um, I was I was wondering, you've had such a incredible online presence and anything. Do you have any advice to any young artists of yeah, good any tips on how they can market themselves in this online world?
So I get this question a lot, and I used to say I'll still stand by this, but I'll maybe make like an addendum. I think it's always about the art.
Yeah.
So I think there's space for artists to become other things. Like I have friends who, get on TikTok and they talk about art. So their account's a little bit more art history and them having like uh, more of like a parasocial relationship with their followers and that kind of stuff. But I know a lot of artists, don't want to be in front of the camera. So I still stand by your work being the best, the first and foremost thing you should focus on. I know that a lot of people are creative, and I think that if you feel like sharing, people like seeing process. People like seeing how things are made. It's always interesting. You can sit there and watch someone draw for like 10 minutes and it's like, oh my gosh, like that's so cool to have something come from nothing. It's really amazing. So while you may not think like other people might think it's interesting, I think it's always worth trying. Um, though now, as an artist, as if you're like just getting on social media or you're trying, I think it seems like a lot like a numbers game. It feels like, especially with something like TikTok, the more you post, the better. Like,
Mhm.
if you're making like 2 or 3 videos a day, it's a lot. So if you have the energy to do it and you're excited about doing that kind of stuff, then I would suggest try it. Like, why not? Like, just throw things out there and just like put things out there, and whatever sticks and lands, it does. It may not, but it's really not. It's not anything. You should have fun with it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think like it should be fun and an enjoyable experience. Um, But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's tough. It's
Mm,
really, I think it's really hard. And I think, like, I know you shouldn't focus on follower count and you shouldn't like to put that kind of pressure on yourself. But I know that as like young people who are trying to get into the arts or become artists, it's something that is becoming more and more of a realistic need. Um, I don't really know how to navigate that. I think,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. But if you, number one, have fun and enjoy the things you post and make the art.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
With having had so much like online success, have you found that social media, has it ever kind of like grabbed your soul a bit, you know? Like how do you manage, I suppose, the addictive nature of social media, particularly when it's been such an important part of actually your success?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean it's a push and pull. Like
Right.
I don't have any notifications on for my Instagram. That's why I've been like so slow to get back to you and stuff.
No,
Cause
you've been
like
great.
it's hard because I could you could easily spend so many hours on your phone. And
Hmm.
so I turn off all notifications. I actually do not look at comments. So like again, that's another thing that people say you should do. You should be responding to comments and like interacting with your audience and stuff. But it really like I for me it feels draining. I know there's people out there, other artists I know who can just like respond all day. They have a great time. They love doing it. But for me, it becomes it like it makes me anxious. It makes me feel like I have this responsibility that I need to respond and I have to like be present for these people. And while I want to, I have a hard time like doing it. So I just like don't read comments. I don't look at my notifications. I don't have notifications on, to tell me something's happened. Um, and I don't know if this is necessarily related to your question, but there's this other thing that's like, like I've had people send me like people who other artists or like maybe hobbyists or whatever who are very inspired by my work and they're like kind of copying my work.
Oh my God, I saw a video on YouTube like how to make a Dan Lamb sculpture. I'm like, do you
Yeah.
realize how not okay that is? Whoever's made this video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
that's a
really
tough one, right? I
it
imagine.
is. It
Mm,
is really tough because it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like, wow, I can't believe I'm in a place where I've made something that other people want to make and they're inspired by it. And it's like, it sparked something in them and maybe like a trend or two or whatever. So that's really beautiful. I think it's amazing. And I can't complain about that. But on the other edge of that sword is like, I have like it is an instinctive reaction when I see people copying my work that
of
it makes
course.
me it just makes me sad. Like it makes me feel not good. And I still haven't been able to like really verbalize what that feeling is. But what I do know is, I've spent so many years like investing myself, my time, my energy, my ideas, putting myself into my work and to develop my voice. And not to say like I work in a vacuum chamber. Of course, we're all influenced by things. We're all humans. We're all inspired by very similar things. But I think it's hard when you know that you've dedicated so much um, time and energy, not to mention money. Like there's so much
Mm,
like
mm.
material costs and all those things, all of it. To then share my work with other people, to share bits and pieces of my process, to then see like someone be like, oh yeah, I can do that, and then they try or they copy or whatever. It upsets me.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
absolutely. I can totally understand that. I can totally
yeah,
understand that. Because yeah, it hasn't, you haven't just stumbled across a technique. You've created that technique. You've developed it over
yeah,
years and countless errors. But I mean, the thing is, ultimately, they won't stick around. Whoever's making those things, they're having their little moment,
right,
and hopefully that aids them onto figuring out the next thing. And yeah, we just live in a world where everyone has to put everything online, right? And everyone wants to get
right,
all those clicks. And then, especially when you
yeah.
see something like a process video of how to make a Dan Lamb, and that's got like a few thousand hits, you're like, ah, but they'll go as quick as they come, really. I mean,
Yeah.
how can you really have any thinking you're doing anything good if your entire uh if you do make your entire practice based off someone else's practice? So yeah, it just comes and goes. It comes and goes. But and easier said, but yeah, you really just the only thing you can do is take it as a compliment, right?
Right.
Easier said than done, because you do have that instantaneous reaction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know I've got a few friends that have had their styles bitten, and I've got one friend who he developed these amazing animations, and then someone else like blatantly bit them and then started getting heaps of opportunities, and it's like, oh my god, like that's a hard pill to swallow, but
Yeah.
it happens, right? It happens. But yeah, like you said, it's about the art, it's about the ideas, and focusing on that is I mean, that's the most important thing. That's where originality is. So
Hmm.
sorry that happens. That sucks. That really sucks. But I mean, no one's talking about them.
Right.
Everyone's talking about your
Well, thank
stuff.
you.
No one's talking about them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I definitely, yeah, that's I think the practice like we've talked about of like the spiritual side of things and like all that
Mm,
stuff, it definitely helps me like see the bigger picture. And it is like I try to just look at it as a positive and just know that um I'm inspiring other people. And
yeah,
yeah, like, and I think too, I've talked with friends about it and they're always like, well, those people are always going to be a step behind. No matter
exactly.
whatever they do, you're going to be a step ahead because you're the person that's like pushing forward,
Mm. And imagine for
Um
them, like they'll literally have to. If people always say, "Oh, that looks like a Dan Lamb," no one's ever going to say that in reverse. So that would be
right.
irritating enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of mentioned your your spiritual interests and stuff. Have you? Has this always been a part of your life? And what is kind of a bit of insight into your spiritual practice?
Um, I don't know that like I didn't grow up with any kind of traditional organized religion. Um we when I was a kid, I was like baptized, like, a lot of Vietnamese people are either Buddhist or Catholic. But I stopped going to church when I was like just a kid. So I didn't grow up with any kind of like structured religion or anything like that. Um I don't know. I feel like as it's things I think about a lot, like what what is everything like,
What's
and
going
it's
on
fun.
here?
Yeah.
What is
It's fun
this?
to think about. It's like, it's really beautiful, I think, and I definitely don't think this is it. I
Hmm.
think, like especially with like a lot of like the studies and like quantum physics and like string theory and stuff like that coming out that kind of line up with ideas of consciousness and like where our consciousness is, and like, when you meditate and you realize I'm not my thoughts,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings, you are the thing that's observing those things. And then you think like, what is that? What is the consciousness? Like, what is observing those things? And so I don't know, there's just something really, really cool there. Like, it makes me feel like there's more than just we're so limited in what we know, and we're so limited by our physical bodies and this biology that's evolved in a certain way to exist in this world, that I think it's just like a blip in our bigger existence, whatever that means.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
absolutely. Yeah. Have you
yeah.
ever done DMT?
Um, so I think that's the next thing I want to do is I want to go on an ayahuasca retreat.
I just did one
Um,
a couple of weeks ago.
oh my God, how was it?
Yeah, I didn't break through. It's
What?
unfortunately, I know it's I don't think I had enough, which was a bit annoying. I think I've got a bit of a healthy tolerance to that kind of stuff. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, I
No.
they're beautiful. They're wonderful. But yeah, yeah. You should do it.
Yeah, so actually, I right before COVID started, I in 2019, I was like researching like ayahuasca retreats. I was looking at Peru, and you know, I was like, I had found a couple that I was interested in, and I'd been invited to a few in Colorado, like a couple in New York State, and it was weird because none of them felt right.
Mm,
And anyone who's taken psychedelics, not as a party drug, but as like, something bigger than that, knows like you have to respect the psychedelic. You have to
yep.
respect it. There is no, it will slap you in the face and tell you what's what if you don't respect it. So for me, I was like, well, I'm seeking out this medicine, and there's ways I can get it, but nothing felt right. And so then COVID happened and all the retreats were, like on hold. So I was like, okay, well, this isn't the time. This isn't right. This is just
Mm.
what's meant to be. Um, so now I have since then met a few people, and I have some friends in Peru who I just saw in Miami for Basel, and they mentioned their ayahuasca experiences, and they've been through it, they know, and they're like, we can help you find like the right shaman and the right people. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is like, this feels right. I like that it's coming from friends, and like
Yeah,
that's attached with it, rather than just finding something online, which there's no problem with that. But I think for me, like my gut says, like I want to find it in a more organic way.
totally, totally. And
Yeah.
it's a funny territory now because it's become so popularized, which is wonderful. But there it's almost like that the kind of shamanism stuff is almost like an industry now. So you do want to try and, I mean, so much of psychedelics is set and setting, right? And
Right.
where are you at mentally, emotionally? You
Right.
want to feel at ease going in. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
super important. So couldn't agree more. When things feel right or not, sometimes all the doors just open, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
cool, this is the way to go. And other times there's obstacles and just really hard getting contact and getting the schedule free. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, you just have to use that as a bit of a guide, I think, with these things. It's funny how it all works, I suppose, if you if you
Yeah.
that
I mean,
stuff.
it reminds me of when, like we were talking about. So I did, the first time I did mushrooms was like 15 years ago, 14 years
Mm,
ago. And at the time, it wasn't as easy to find as it is now.
mm,
People weren't like microdosing. It was just you found some mushrooms and you just like did them, right? And
yeah.
sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. You didn't know how much to eat, all of that stuff. And I felt that way about acid. Like I was interested in it and I was curious about it, but it was so difficult to find. And when it came, I took it as like, oh yeah, this is it. This is a sign, because it's presented itself to me rather
Yeah.
than I've fought hard to find it. It found
Yeah.
me. So, because like, I mean, when you look at the history of like acid, for example, and like who was it, Albert Hoffman, I believe, like
Yeah.
discovered it, and
Hmm.
it was not the thing he meant to find, but he kept it because he liked the way the molecule structure looked.
Mm.
And such a beautiful, like, how amazing is that, that like
Yeah.
this human being found this thing by kind of, not by accident, but
It was
inadvertently,
kind of
and
by
saved
accident,
it.
right?
Right, it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
yeah. um and he just saved it even though he was supposed to get rid of it because he liked the way it looked. And I don't know, like that's such a cool story. And so like I think about it the same way. Like any of these other psychedelics, it's like there's something magical about them, you know?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really mysterious. And yeah, I mean, particularly with like DMT, and it's got the nickname of the spirit molecule. It's
Hmm.
depending on how much you want to actually buy into your own hallucinations, if you want to call them that, whatever they are, whether you want to see them as reality, a whole new reality, or whether you want to see them as the incredible complexity of your brain. But yeah, I mean, it really almost does seem like the DMT spirit molecule is like a little portal into another into like just opening up the veil and seeing what
Yeah.
else is kind of behind the scenes. Like reality is like the stage, right? This is the show, we're all at the show, but then you can peek behind the curtains and see all the people pulling the ropes to create all the harness, you know what I mean? Like it's all the workings
Yeah.
that's going on. Like that's kind of how it seems a bit to me. I mean, who knows what's going
Right.
on, but it's interesting. It it's magic. It's magic. It's actually it's allowing you to experience magic,
Hmm.
whatever that means to you. And I think life is more magical when you allow magic into it, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. A few years ago, so I've never broken through, but I have tried DMT a couple times.
Mm.
And I think that's part of why I was like, maybe I need to experience ayahuasca instead of
Hmm.
like DMT. Like I want the yeah, I just wanted like the full experience of it.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it did that. It was like a little peak. It was like I didn't break through, but I went somewhere that was not, I was like, this is not, how do I explain it? So the first time I did it, it was like putting on virtual reality glasses. Like it's not, when you close your eyes and you imagine like a room or a setting, you can't just like move around and see everything in that room. You know,
Mm.
it's like you can picture things, but it's not like you're there. But with a DMT,
You're
even though I didn't
there.
break through, I went somewhere.
Yeah,
There
you're
was somewhere like a
there.
setting that I was at, and I literally was in a different place and I could look around and see like, oh, there's this behind me and this like mountain in the distance and the sky is like like a checkered pattern. Um and it felt like another reality. It felt very much like this is I just transported. I was just like went through a portal to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Um which is so cool. How
Yeah.
amazing is that?
I know, I
Yeah.
know. But yeah, yeah. I really hope you find the right shaman or facilitator or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And have those experiences because yeah, they're incredible. And I really feel that they help with creativity, you know. I really
Mhm.
feel that they helped with my creativity at least. They definitely have. So yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, you know, they call it like tripping, but it is almost like I often feel like how I feel after a big trip, like after a big holiday. I feel refreshed, I feel inspired, I feel like a bit more connected with me. And it is, you can kind of have a similar feeling after a successful psychedelic trip, you know, it really is a trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and a spiritual experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I wish I'm very glad that like as a society we're kind of going through like this renaissance, right? Of like
Mm,
of psychedelics and there's more research into its benefits and what it can do for people. Um it's really nice. It's really refreshing because I think it's touching on things that a lot of artists who have dabbled in it, participated, have known for a really long time. Um I feel like it's really healthy. It feels more like, rather than, I don't know, taking something as a reaction to a symptom, it's like, here's this thing that can like help you overall. Like,
mm,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially like creatively, like a lot of psychedelic art has been, well, you know, you kind of got the 60s aesthetic, which was really kind of wavy lines and cool, which I love. But you know, a lot of modern psychedelic art has been very like I suppose in that visionary category, which is cool too. But I really love psychedelic art that is not in that category, that's kind of pushing new bounds, like your art, like very much what your art. It's unexpected, you know. It's
Hmm.
and it does tap into those yeah, there's like this sort of collective not deja vu or like trigger for a lot of people. It does take them to that wonderful space when they have that
Hmm.
wonderful experience. I mean, look, hey, disclaimer, some people have awful experiences on psychedelics.
That's
So you
true.
know, it's not like it's all peaches and cream, but anyway, we don't need to talk about that right now. Your work's awesome. And I love seeing refreshing, new, not like it's all about psychedelia, but you know, it's got psychedelic qualities to it. And big fan, Dan, big fan. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for joining me. It's been so great to talk with you. Um, would love to try and get back over to the States in the next few years, and if I do, I'll see if you're around. See if you're around. And,
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I would love
trip
that.
falls together.
Okay, deal.
Awesome. How so? Oh yeah, how do people buy your work? Are you with a gallery or are you just solely independent?
Yeah, so I work primarily with the gallery called Hashimoto Contemporary.
Great gallery.
They are in New York, San Francisco, and LA.
Mhm.
Um, So I work with them. I also work with a few other galleries. One in Portland called Stephanie Shafis Projects. Although I think she just changed her name to Shafis Projects.
Hmm.
Maybe. I'll have to check on that. She just did like a rebrand. And then like a gallery sometimes in Denver called Black Book. So I kind of, like I get around, but so you can purchase my work through galleries, or every year, if you're looking for, like, I do this drop a release called minis, so they're just like little miniature versions of my work. And usually, like, every year I've done more and more, made more and more pieces for these drops. But that's another way to get them. I also take commissions, but I don't publicly like announce that, because I think that's what I would be doing all the time, is
Right.
commissions. And
Right.
while they're fun, uh, I want to like make stuff that I'm curious about.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I
you
hate
know.
commissions. They're they
Yeah.
never turn out as good as you want them, because it's, I don't know. You need to follow
Yeah,
your own curiosity.
right. There's something about, it's almost like I kind of procrastinate on them. Like,
Mm, mm.
I don't know what it is. It's like, I think it's because someone told me to do it. I don't
Yep. Yep,
know.
totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, everyone should follow you on Instagram. Hey, what's the story behind your Instagram name? Wait, what is it?
It's Sopopomo. I made it while
Sopopomo.
I was in grad school.
Yep.
It stands for so postmodern.
Ah,
It's
okay. So there is a meaning. Cool.
Yeah, it's like, I think it was around the time Drake's YOLO came out, You Only Live Once.
Right.
And I was like, and people were like shortening all kinds of things. So I don't know. And then there was that side of like art school where it was like, where does your art fall in the context of art history? And I'm like, well, I don't know, because it's happening in real time right now, so it's kind of like a little, like, my art is so postmodern.
Yep. Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. It's been really great to chat with you.
Thank you for having
Cool.
me.
No worries. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.